story like the back of my hand, 'cause I've heard it all before.
Taxes are the only certainty. Will 20% of people of society? And I have made it on my own in this world. Will not take care of time around a 2-year-old. I'm gonna start the own nation and do my own thing, and I will be king. I'm gonna start the own nation with the self-preservation. I'm gonna start the own nation with the self-preservation. Well, let me talk a bit about the weather. You must admit it's not very clever. Don't get me wrong, it's not an anti-British song. Well, there is nowhere I would rather be wrong. I'm gonna start my own nation and do my own thing, and I will be king. I'm gonna start my own nation with the self-preservation. I'm gonna start my own nation with the self-preservation. There are just a few things that I would like to say about the UK and how I think it has gone astray. Don't get me wrong, it ain't all bad. I love the crazy fads, like England always buggering up, but you know we're gonna win the World Cup. I'm gonna start the own nation with the self-preservation. I'm gonna start the own nation with the self-preservation.
Keep the red flag flying here.
And hello, pop pickers, and it is a very important political unmuted tonight because it is the 69th edition, and I am 69. One of our members will be getting exceptionally excited, so just calm down, Neil, and don't commit any indiscretions because you got overexcited. I speak as a former teacher. Welcome to the team, and we have our resident wonderman, Paul Daly. Hello, Paul.
Hello.
We have our deep thinking man of deep words, Stuart Sutherland. Say hello, Stuart.
Hello.
We have our sort of Miss Do Everything and Go Everywhere and Be Everything to Everybody, Samantha Townsend. Say hello, Samantha.
Hello.
And we're just delighted to welcome back Jane Strange, who is rapidly, watch out, Stuart, establishing herself as the woman who makes the good statements. Welcome, Jane. Hello.
Hello.
Thank you. And to all you people beginning to sign in, Mark Lungley, you were the first. Welcome, welcome. Hello to all you, and to, of course, to all the people who are watching on the podcast later. This is Political Unmuted, and I think we just go straight, Paul. Now, for the 69th edition, we've just decided that I'm going to ignore Paul for every question. So I'm going to go straight to him to try and make amends. So you're first, Paul, for your moment of the week, please.
How many do I get this week, John?
So, you can have two. You can have two.
You can have two. Oh,
yes.
Brilliant. Okay, well, one of them, I'll go two Labour leaders then. In that case, one former, one present. So the present Labour leader released a statement yesterday, which was really kind of funny. If it wasn't so tragic, it was like, "We are the party of workers. Therefore, I've been speaking to business about how unskilled you are, and we're going to talk to them about how we can possibly skill you up, because actually, you're not very skilled." And it was like the worst constructed message in support of workers I have ever seen. It was just kind of like, sometimes I think that maybe they've missed the idea that they're called the Labour Party and they want to be called the Boss Party. But, that's that. And then another former Labour leader has released a statement today. Jeremy Corbyn has released a press statement saying Councillor Paul Nicholson to pay substantial damages and legal costs to Jeremy Corbyn regarding a false defamatory statement. And this was the one where they showed Jeremy Corbyn laying a wreath on that blown up car, which is pretty disgusting. And it's a very substantial apology. It's readable on Jeremy Corbyn's Facebook page and probably on Twitter as well. It's just it's the kind of thing that really should have happened a long time ago, where they're saying like all these ideas that he supports terrorism are completely false, but the press went on about it and people went on about it on TV, and they know that there's no substance in this. They know that it wouldn't stand up to any sort of scrutiny. What a shame we're in this absolute pathetic position that we find ourselves in as a country because everyone was so willing to believe the worst about a good man.
Yes, outrageous, and good for him doing that. Thank you, Paul. Two smashing moments of the week. The sort of both of them challenging in their own way. Sam, moment of your week.
Yeah, on Sunday there was a collection of national, sort of everywhere, not a national demo, but nationally spread demonstrations in support of midwives, which I just thought was lovely. It was lovely because it was really grassroots. It wasn't led by people like me or politicians, or it was led by parents, mothers, midwives, and other people who support birthing people. So I just thought it was really good. But I'm in a Facebook group for that, and Neil, speak of him again, Neil went down to Leeds and photographed the demonstration down there. It's really interesting being in their group, and I've watched them sort of develop and seeing people ask questions like, how has it got to the people who are just clicking that things are wrong and saying, how has it got this way? Can't, the CQC intervene, or, is there someone we can complain to? And suddenly coming to the understanding that the system isn't broken, it is working in exactly the way it was designed to.
The government responded that there are more midwives than ever before. I mean, what's your statement about that?
I want people to look outside their window and see what is actually happening, right? Last time I checked, there weren't functioning showers in Darlington midwifery, the Darlington maternity unit. People couldn't get a shower in the maternity unit. They had to go to a different unit. In Bishop Auckland, I was booked in to go to Bishop Auckland Hospital to have my second child. Nobody actually told me it had closed. And basically I got to Darlington just in time for somebody to catch, and that meant that I was forced into a home birth that I didn't actually want with my third child, because there's nowhere I can safely give birth. That we shouldn't be in a situation, and that was 6 years ago. It's definitely got worse since then. So I think when people see these statements such as there's the most funding ever gone into X service, there's more midwives than ever, I think they should ask a midwife before they go for some Tory lies.
Thank you, Sam. We'll be talking more about that kind of thing in relation to the NHS for our first big story. Jane, moment of the week.
So I'm quite excited about my moment of the week because I found out that yesterday Harry Leslie Smith's son, John Smith, he started up a newsletter, which is pretty brilliant, but he's going to be serialising Harry's memoirs in it, putting political essays, and he wants to start a Harry Leslie Smith Foundation, which would make me so happy, because Harry Leslie Smith was such an amazing man, and John seems like such a lovely, lovely person. He was on one of the Saturday night Socialist Live night shows, so on Saturday with about refugees, and he's just a genuinely lovely person. And we should not forget Harry and his generation. And if you read the books that he wrote about growing up before the NHS, it's absolutely heartbreaking. And I think people really need to know and remember this. Thank
you. Yes. How can you, is there a link we can post in the chat or something like that, Jane?
So I'm going to attempt to share the link without losing my internet connection, which I think is slightly dodgy today. So if I freeze for a second, I'll be back, but I'll be posting the link.
It's okay. Well, hurry back because you're kicking off on the NHS. Stuart, you've got to, if Jane disappears, you'll just have to keep talking for a while. Stuart, what's your moment of the week?
Mine is that a disgraced ex-Conservative MP, I won't say his name because one, he's a sex offender, and two, it's a really hard name to say. He's stood up in court and said that he can't pay the court costs of £35,000 because he's on universal credit. The same man, this poor guy, voted 6 times not to increase universal credit payments to claimants because it wasn't enough, and now he's pleading poverty at the other end of it, and it's a shame that you've got to be a disgraced sex offender to be taken seriously when you say that universal credit isn't enough money.
I mean, the withdrawal of legal aid also in that situation was just one of the biggest injustices of our century, I think. Yeah. Thank you very much indeed. Jane, you're still here.
I'm still here.
Thank goodness for that. Let's move on.
Now it's time for the big story.
This arose because I really rather cheated you last week and wouldn't let you have the story that you wanted to discuss. I made you wait way too weak for it, but I promised you that it would be the big story. So it's a kind of a fortnight's worth of news that we're going to be talking about here. And this is basically the idea that the NHS is at breaking point, and that level of pressure is unsustainable, and that it's damaging care in general. Sort of Jane, at what level on a scale of 1 to 10 would you put the level of crisis in the NHS at the moment? Tell us all about it.
I think we're slightly past 10 now, aren't we? Some people would say it's a lot higher than that. It seems like the staff are crying out for help. It seems like they're at breaking point. Every doctor's have had a campaign for some time now. There's a few NHS campaigns going on trying to get Sajid Javid to do something about the crisis that we're walking into this winter after the 11 years of Tory underfunding, 2 years of a pandemic where it feels like government ministers have just seen it as a free-for-all to help themselves or their friends to, lucrative PPE contracts for PPE that wasn't even available to the staff and didn't work if they did get it. We've got tens of thousands less hospital beds than we had when this government first came into government. We've got a huge staffing crisis. We didn't have enough staff years ago, but with the removal of the nursing bursary and then the badly negotiated Brexit deal, which has led to us losing so many European staff members, and then the pandemic, so many staff are just leaving the health sector because of what they've been through over the last 2 years after the trauma they'd already been through with 9 years of Tory government. It's in a critical state. And I read a story yesterday about an ambulance crew who said that on their 11-hour shift they'd only managed to treat one patient and they wanted to treat a lot more, but they'd spent the whole time waiting outside the hospital for a bed because there wasn't a bed, and there were people on the phones hanging on. And I'm reading stories about people dying waiting for ambulances. I mean, for the patients families, this is horrific. Can you imagine what it must be for a staff member being aware that you're part of something that's malfunctioning to that extent, through no fault of your own, through managed underfunding, and the new legislation that's been put through in the last 2 days couldn't be further from the solution to this. It's basically a huge restructuring which offers nothing to solve the solution to the staffing crisis, which offers no new funding. It puts private companies on the boards of NHS decision-making bodies. It splits the NHS up into 42 separate little organisations. It removes the tendering process, which is supposed to offer more choice for the NHS if you read the reports on it. But I don't understand how the current process, where you put out a tender and anyone can offer, moving to a situation where you do a deal with one person behind closed doors. I don't understand how that's offering more choice to the NHS. It seems the opposite to me. A restructuring anywhere demoralises staff, but to do this to staff who are already so traumatised and stretched right now, it's just a horrific thing to do to the staff, and it's completely immoral that this is happening to the country, and I don't think people know about it.
My second question was what's going wrong, but quite frankly, you've just given absolutely devastating explanation of all the things that are going wrong. I suppose the next question is this 100% down to an incompetent government, or are there other factors fueling all those issues that you've just talked about?
I can't think of anything that's out of the control of this government to have, done a lot better. All of the things that are failing are within the remit of government to control and manage, and then they're either not managing it or they're purposefully managing it badly. I don't know which it is. I'm not sure they care very much, to be honest, because I don't understand how they can watch what's happening to the staff and the devastating appeals we've seen from staff throughout the pandemic. I think we've all seen them. How can you watch that and just not care? How can you watch that and know that nurses are going to food banks, and then sit there as an MP and tell them that although you were recommended they should have a higher pay rise, they shouldn't, but because you were recommended to yet again have a 10% pay rise, oh dear, you'd better. How can you do that if you really care?
One's personal experience affects how one looks at this. The crisis isn't just about either, is it about the staff who are crumbling under the pressure of just having everything dumped on them with insufficient resources to do it, and it's not even about the problem of the ambulances and the inability to treat people. There's this hidden epidemic of a failure to care properly for people who are stacking up with existing conditions, which the NHS is just not getting round to deal with, isn't it? Sort of people who have developing cancers, people who have diabetes, people who have all kinds of conditions, cataracts that aren't getting addressed. And this is just building up and building up a huge head of steam. Isn't it Wales that has a record number of people ever with unlooked at conditions? I mean, sort of, which of these would you say? You're going to tell me they're all as important as the other, aren't they? Tell me, sort of, which are you most worried about? The current pressure on staff, or this unaddressed backlog of conditions?
I think they're both terrible, aren't they? They're both terrible, and I really, really care about the staff. But one of the other worst things that this new legislation does is that it removes actually the duty for care to be given. And so that kind of shows to me what the response is to this huge backlog of people needing treatment. Some of those people just won't get treatment. They've just decided, like when they scrapped the child poverty measures because they didn't want to think about how much child poverty there was, they'll just take away the duty to care, and then we don't have to treat the people, and people will die and suffer, and that will become normal in this country, and we'll become like America, where people are regularly bankrupted through paying for routine medical treatment. It seems to be the way that we're going, and that I think is even worse than what's happening to the staff, because people will die.
Thank you. I mean, that's what you just told me there is I think the most devastating thing. The removal of the duty to care is ultimately a betrayal of the NHS, isn't it? And a betrayal of the North. Sam, you were talking about the midwives and about the government lies, basically, about that they're putting more and more resources. Is the answer just to chuck money at this, to actually just give a lot greater resources to the NHS?
Yeah, Tories like to say chuck money at the problem, like money doesn't help services run effectively. There are loads of things that we need to look at. We need to look at how care workers are paid. We need to look at how they are valued and how they are progressed in their field of work, and given the opportunity to thrive and to be proud of their place of work. And we need to look at the fact that, you know, we know the vast majority of us will have the privilege of getting old, and for a lot of us, then there will be some care needs associated with that. What the government have thought up, oh no, we're not talking about that, are we?
No, we're not. We're talking about the NHS, but it's relevant. Just substitute the word medical care, the word medical before care, and you're away. It's the same business, isn't it?
Yeah, I've a very long day. The NHS, yeah. You know what? Money helps. That's what I'm gonna say. you can say throw money at it, but money does help. We were talking about restructuring things, the new restructuring they're going to have instead of CCGs, and talking to other councillors the other day, they were like, we're always restructuring, and you know, who does it benefit? Doesn't seem to benefit anybody on the ground, doesn't benefit the workers. It must benefit someone or it wouldn't happen. So I think there's a big question to ask there about who does it benefit. Let's follow the money and find out who is actually getting the money.
Seeing as I seem to be talking in tropes at the moment, it's just reorganising the decks on the deck chairs on the Titanic, isn't it? What are we going to do? Oh my God! Well, let's reorganise the deck chairs. I mean, the government is chucking money at it, isn't it, Sam? I mean, I read one article which says that they're spending £1 million a day on consultants for test and trace. So there is
there
money.
It is. That's where the money's going, yeah. And I saw some analysis the other day again at the council, talking about how much money is spent on acute services, and acute services are of course expensive. And I do wonder, you know, how much of that money could be saved by helping people before their illness becomes acute. And I'm not, obviously, as technologies progress, things are expensive. High-tech, modern medicines are expensive. Fair enough. But when we were talking last week about cycling, how expensive is it to set up a bike hire scheme in every town in this country? I don't think that's too much to ask.
Yeah, I mean, sort of, you've got to be careful from arguing from your own specific case, but Barbara had a real crisis with her kidneys, as you know, this early this summer, and we've all changed. I mean, sort of, do I have to stretch like this to get my head in the sort of? But we were checking back, and there were just 3 tests done on her in 2020, just 3, and sort of the whole load of stuff that was developing has just got missed, and the result of that is the crisis that we saw. Thank you so much, Sam. Stuart, when you look on the continent, I mean, the rioting on the continent, I mean, it's sort of much worse at the moment over there. COVID is just running riot, and the government's having to take extreme measures, and the system is really collapsing over there. I mean, our staff, wonderful as they are struggling to cope. In places on the continent, it's just disintegrating under the pressure. I mean, do you think we're being a bit hard on the government and on the condition of the NHS, given this external pressure from COVID, from coronavirus?
No, not at all. I mean, clearly the NHS operates differently to how our friends on the continent run their medical systems. Many of them are, co-pay systems. There's different aspects to how they operate and how they're managed. What I think is happening is we're seeing a capital elite seize the opportunity to break us down much quicker than they maybe anticipated, to create opportunity to put money in people's pockets who shouldn't have it.
I mean, some of the measures being that yes is the answer. Thank you for that comment. The people, the countries abroad, they're beginning to take some quite extreme measures. I mean, do you think we need to take those measures here, Stuart, to try and ease that pressure on the NHS?
I think it would, as a group of people, we need to, realise how important the NHS is to our daily lives, the fabric of our society. And as people, we should cling on to that and really push the government to take the most, desperate measures. Imagine that it's your nan who's needing extraordinary measures to be kept alive in a hospital. You want those measures to be taken, don't you? You don't want to say, no, it's going to cost too much. You don't sit back. You need it doing. That's how we have to think about things. The NHS is on life support at the moment. Yes.
Would you contemplate cancelling Christmas? Would you contemplate returning to any form of lockdown? I mean, at the moment, what they're doing is they're just hoping that rolling out the vaccination system faster and faster will just keep the lid on enough for them to be able to avoid extreme measures like that. I mean, do you think it's necessary to do both?
First of all, I don't think a lockdown cancels Christmas. I think what it does is slow people from going to the shops and spending loads of money, which I think is the reason why they don't want to do it in government. But we end up down this roadmap on COVID based on decisions that were taken months ago, and we know who to blame for those decisions. It lies squarely at the feet of Boris Johnson and his government.
Thank you, Stuart. Paul, draw everything to a close for us. I mean, what's the score here? We've heard that the team generally feel it's the government's fault. They generally feel that lack of money is an issue, but stronger measures would be possible and would be welcome. I mean, what's your take on all this?
I I think it's deeply complex, and I think it's more sinister than a lot of us think. If we just think in terms of money, just think in terms of like this government, successive governments have gradually privatized the NHS, and they have seen the public sector as a cash cow. And this is something that people don't really understand, and I think this was really badly understood in 2019 when they talked about the privatisation of the NHS. They didn't mean that immediately you'll start paying for your treatment on the, you know, as you walk into a hospital, as you walk into a doctor's. What was meant by it was that more and more private companies will be involved, which means you get a poorer service because they have to pay shareholders. And I think that's what a lot of people miss on this. Like, so in the US, when people, Jane referred to people going bankrupt in the US, but the public sector pay 4 times per head what we pay in this country. So for every pound spent on the NHS, they spend £4 of public money on that. And that is to make sure that those privateers, the big pharma or people who run hospitals or whatever, get their profits. And this is massively, massively misunderstood, but this is capitalism. This is modern capitalism. This is not the kind of capitalism with it the NHS kind of grew up within. You know, it was a socialist concept within a capitalist world. Capitalism is just this absolute monster that is eating everything. It's pushing everything. And you're saying, like, you're talking about putting more money into the NHS. Yeah, but if it's just going to go into like a consultant's pocket, then what is the point of that? We need to think about what our services are for. They're for people's health. They're to help people. They are not to have a swathe of bureaucrats working in middle management, which is what happens to make sure that, like, you know, no one sues them. And it's also like not to make sure that shareholders get paid. It's something different, and that is fundamental to what the NHS should be and the public sector should be. And we've really, really lost that, in my view, and we're losing it in education as well. We're losing it across the board, where profit matters more than outcomes. So that's where we are at the moment. Profit is more important than health.
It's deeply depressing. Thank you. And sometimes, Paul, I wonder, I mean, is there a way out? Is there any hope here? Everything you've said, all of you, is just so true. But it just leaves me thinking, is there any hope for me as I get older? I mean, what can I look forward to except just being sort of, at best, sat on a wheelchair in a corridor whilst they ignore me, and probably worse, not being picked up at all. Is there any hope? Where do we need to go from here to make it better?
We are the hope, and by we I mean ordinary people. I mean people with left-wing views, people with working class views. We need to come together. And I'm talking about all sorts of different people here. So I know people who have politically different views to me, but when it comes to talking about looking after working class people, they really care. And when you explain to them what exactly is happening in the NHS, they are disgusted. And everyone will be disgusted at what's going on. The problem is that there is no one in the media who really wants to push this home. There's been some talk in the chat which has been very interesting about why the media aren't all over this. Every now and then you get a panorama program and then people talk about it for a week and then it's gone. And nothing really happens, and there's no sustained pressure. And you have We Own It or Keep Our NHS Public, those kind of groups who are trying to keep the pressure on all the time, but there's nothing sustained in the media. So we have to do it ourselves. Which the whole reason this channel exists is to get some real information out there. This is not propaganda, this is fact. And I personally believe that most people are good. And if more people heard this kind of message, without being spoken down to, without being patronised, it's not their fault they don't understand that information just is not out there. if we can get that message out there through whatever media outlet we can, that is our hope and that is our power. But we need to use every little last scrap of energy that we have on this one. So it's the whole reason this channel exists, is to try to change a few people's minds.
Thank you, Paul. Absolutely brilliant. And thank you, everybody, for your comments. Very depressing as they were. I've got a comment for Neil Terry. No, this is not the yin and yang show. It's only yin here. You get no yang. No, there's no yang. It's yin, yin, and more yin. That's all I'm prepared to say at this point. Let's move on. Paul. A betrayal of the North, Sam. Grant Shapps doesn't agree. What do you think? What about the decision to sort of cut HS2 off at Toton?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't believe a word Grant Shapps said before, but every time anybody says his name, I just feel like saying, or is it Philip Green? And this is just such, I mean, gosh, why is our politics such a parody of itself? It's just unbelievable. Right, so I'll come out and say I wasn't a huge fan of the thing in the first place, right? I wasn't a huge fan of I forgot its name. You've just said it.
HS2.
HS2. Thank you. It's been a long day. I wasn't a huge fan of HS2, but that doesn't mean that I'm happy that the northern leg is being scrapped. I think, there's a point where, the local sort of phrase is, you piss or you get off the pot, and they've sat on the pot for too long, John. And there's so many people who've been affected, and businesses have to have time to plan, and they've planned with an idea of this thing's coming down the track, and it's not. So it's just another omni-shambles from this government. What do I want to happen? I want people to have more local rail service connections. I don't go to Birmingham often, and I'm not likely to, but Tim Dredge in the comments put up a Facebook post. He said, you could electrify the train from Saltburn to Shildon and you'd be dragging that line screeching into the 1960s. Our rail infrastructure up here is Victorian. It is embarrassing. And what is even more embarrassing is that there are laws in place to stop state-run rail franchises, except in an emergency. But the vast majority of our private train companies are subsidiaries of the national rail network in other countries. Other countries are getting profit from our railway and investing it in their own. And anybody who's ever been to the continent will know their rail infrastructure is vastly superior to us, and that's why.
I've got a question for you, Sam, about the Weardale Railway. I mean, you have got the Weardale Railway, aren't you? I mean, you must be pleased about that.
Yes. It's more of a tourist thing than a getting people to work thing, though, isn't it? And while it's good, any potential glimmer for economic growth in the northeast is always a good thing. I just think, there are places nearby, Eldon, Dean Valley. If you don't have a car, you can't have a job because people won't employ you because they know how poor the public transport system is. So we're starting from a very low base, and we really need to get the basics right.
And they're still spending twice as much per head on transport in London as they are on transport in the northeast.
Absolutely.
Outrageous. Jane, you're from down south, aren't you? I mean, presumably you've got no sympathy for us up north at all. It's a sort of you must be leaping up and down at the improvements that they're making to your transport system down south.
That's not very socialist though, John. So we've actually got HS1 running through the town that I live in. So we've been really fortunate to have that. And I just think it's awful that people are in a situation where, you know, you have to have a car to get to work. It's wrong. It's really wrong. The buses where we are, they just cut them 2 years ago, and there were villages who'd had a bus service previously, and those villages just don't have a bus service anymore. So those people in those villages got a few weeks' notice that, you know, as presumably they had to leave their jobs if that was how they were getting to work, because there was no other way. And when you look at the situation with the environment, it just seems like a no-brainer that you sort out your public transport. The public transport, like Sam says, if you go to Germany or just about any other country, it's so much better than it is here. It's more frequent, it's cleaner, it's more efficient, it's cheaper. And part of that is because a lot of those companies are providing services here and taking profit out of it, because that's how our system works for them to do that. We've just got our government's got such a bad attitude to public transport here. It feels like it's a really low priority for them. It just runs in the background and they're not too interested in it. And it feels like they've used this to get votes at the last election from people in the north. It just feels very immoral what they've done.
I mean, what they're saying, what Grattan Chaps was saying, was that although they've cancelled the headline HS2 up the northeast side of the country, in fact, they're actually spending more money and improving more services by not doing so. I mean, do you buy that, or is this just another Tory smokescreen?
I think perhaps people would have been a bit more generous to that viewpoint if that's what they'd originally been told they were getting. But it seems like they've rushed this out as a small little bit of compensation to try to brush under the carpet the mess they've made with the HS2 situation.
Thank you, Stuart. There's a lot of opposition to HS2. People quite rightly said, didn't they? What's the point of shaving 20 minutes off the journey to London? What we need is, and particularly east-west transport links, and Sam and Jane are absolutely right, a huge, massive investment in the infrastructure and provision of local transport. So you're caught in a trap, really. You know, do you really weep for the loss of HS2, or actually was it probably the right decision in the long term to not do it?
I mean, I've got no love for HS2 as an idea. Certainly with the ecology aspect of it. My concerns whenever looking at transport is like, can people afford to use it? You know, this new integrated rail plan that they're putting forward says that we're going to shave 17 minutes off getting to London from Newcastle. You know, I've been to London 5 times in my life. That's not important to me. Getting those 17 minutes back will mean nothing. Being able to go, to places like York or Newcastle to work, and that being affordable to do so, that's important. That hasn't changed at all. None of this integrated rail plan has changed at one iota for the people who currently live here, except shaving a couple of minutes off between maybe Darlington up to Durham or vice versa. Irrelevant, the plan. And there's this whole, idea that it's just railways that need fixing. Like, it's got to be an integrated transport plan. You can't do a better railway system without doing better buses. You can't do better buses without looking at cycle lanes, and you can't do cycle lanes if you can't get the basics of it, paving in your street sorted. There's places in my town where it's difficult to walk to the shops. If you can't do walking, you can't do high-speed trains. We need better across the board, and we need it to be accessible to everybody. This is just more smoke screen to look like they've done something, but the best that they're going to achieve is maybe the quality of trains that France had in the mid-80s.
Yes, catch up with France in the mid-80s would be a brilliant thing if we were to be able to do that. I mean, I'm reminded of my former boss, Carl Marshall, who's the leader now of the Labour group, I believe, on Durham County Council. And he's just such an expert on transport. But what his point always was, there's no point in talking about the link between Newcastle and London, or even between Newcastle and Durham. It has to be the link between my doorstep and where I want to go. And that is, so we don't just need a better rail system or a better bus system. We need a joined up system. And this was his point over and over again. And he's been a voice crying in the wilderness. Paul, finally, I mean, I read one thing where sort of the spending sort of high, 96 billion on HS2, and it's just going to turn out to be a link route into London from one part of the country. And it's not about levelling up the country at all. It's certainly not about bringing prosperity to different areas of the country. It's just about providing better contacts for London. Sort of, do you think that this was, as they were saying and have been saying, a betrayal of the Tory promise to level up the northeast?
Depends what you think a betrayal is. Like, did anyone really believe them? You'd have to be an incredibly foolish person to believe what the Tories said. And I'm not 100% sure that people did really believe that they were going to do this thing, which is one of the reasons why these so-called betrayals aren't having the impact that they were going to do. You know, this was a big backlash. This was a big Brexit vote. So I'm not sure people voted for them to do anything or expect them to do anything. They know they don't like us. They know they don't like working class people. They know they hate the North. You know, this is not their comfort zone. It's just the same as they're not bothered about Scotland. They're not bothered about Wales. They really, really aren't bothered. They've got their own little system. As long as they control the country and have their green and pleasant land still voting Tory, they'll be okay. The gerrymandering the vote, they are really, really not worried about our votes next time. They're going to have enough votes to get through the boundary changes and make sure that they'll be okay next time and they'll be in government forever. And, you know, with Labour having lost Scotland as well, and the way Scotland and other areas feel about Labour at the moment, I don't think they're particularly worried. So whether or not it was a betrayal, it was certainly a lie that they told in order to get elected. Whether it's a betrayal or not, like, they have no loyalty to us. You can only betray those that you are loyal to. You know, it's not a real betrayal, is it?
They do care about Peppa Pig World. The sort of that's £100 a ticket. Thank you, Paul. In your role as sweeper, God bless you. The last topic is the social care gap, which has been a second major crisis. Stuart, Polly Toynbee said that, in effect, the Tories are denying care to poorer people. I mean, is it as desperate as that, what they've done? Tell us about what's happened and what it means.
Basically, they've got a law through where your care would be paid by an amount of assets. This is normally going to be your home. Obviously, housing prices across the country vary dramatically. So down in the south, your home is pretty much protected if you've got a relatively, valuable home. The maximum that they're going to take is 85 grand to pay for your care, which would still leave a huge amount of equity in your home. It's not going to go anywhere. It's not going to disappear. Whereas up in the north, in parts of Wales, other parts of the country, homes aren't as valuable. Even if you bought your home outright, it's still maybe not going to be worth more than 100 grand in places. Some places won't even be worth 50 grand. So you would still lose your home. And there's a huge inequality of how this is going to be paying for care. And it's going to lead us to some really serious problems in the future as people, are forced into iffy situations, basically needing to get out of a home at the end of their life for fear that it's going to be taken away from them, which is then going to leave a shortfall in the care system, which was the whole reason that we're supposed to be getting the money this way. So absolutely back to front system that isn't going to work.
Jane, it's not just the value of the houses which is a problem. This was something that I found very difficult to understand. The Tories pushed through a last-minute amendment, didn't they, which made it even more unfair on poorer people. Did you understand how that worked? Are you able to explain to us how that amendment worked to make it even more unfair?
I'm not sure if I understand it properly. The way I understood it was that, is this to do with the cap on the 85,000 or?
It was to do with council contributions.
Oh, yes. Yeah, I did read that. Yeah. So the £85,000 cap, if you are eligible for the council contributions, the £85,000 cap won't take into account what the council's contributed. You'll still contribute the first £85,000 of your assets that you'll have. So it seems very unfair.
I'm going to wonder if you're right there, and I'm prepared to be wrong here because it's so complicated, this, and this is where they win, isn't it? But I think the way that worked was that if you get help from the council towards your payments, they take those council contributions as part of your 85,000. So you won't, even though you may have only contributed 25,000, they're still going to come to you for £85,000 worth of your house. I think that was how that was going to work, and sort of consequently, the people who were the poorest, who needed the greatest help, were nevertheless going to be walloped for £85,000. Sort of. Now, if I'm wrong on that, can somebody tell me on the thing? It just struck me as being again a betrayal of levelling up, Jane, a betrayal of promises to help poorer people, and yet again just shoving money into the pockets of the wealthiest.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't surprise me that this government isn't looking out for the poorest. Doesn't surprise me that they're protecting the wealthiest. I wish I was disappointed by, well, I am disappointed, but I wish I was even slightly surprised by any of this. But there just seems to be no limit to the depth that they'll sink to, trying to suck the blood out of poor people in this country.
And brazen about it, Jane. I mean, just absolutely openly brazen about it.
They've got away with it because last time they tried something along these lines, there was a big outcry when Theresa May was Prime Minister. Perhaps it's slightly different what they're doing now, but in my simplified version of it, it seems like a little bit similar to what she said. And Boris Johnson's election pledge specifically said that no one would have to sell their home, and now they've gone back on it. And I'm not seeing the public outcry or the media outcry that I saw when Theresa May was Prime Minister. It seems like she wasn't in favour to the extent the current governing group are.
Thank you. Sam, do you think that this is a case, do you think with Jane that this is a case of ask the rich to put their hand in their pockets, and there's one hell of an outcry and we have to change our plans, but bash the poor and everybody just lets it slide through on the nod? Is this what's happening here?
Well, people expect it from the Tories, don't they? And that's what the sort of reaction I had when I was talking about it on Facebook today, was people saying, well, my parents already had to sell their house to access their care, so nothing's changed, so nothing's happened. But something has happened. The government has chosen one of potentially the most regressive forms of taxation we've ever seen, where you get to lose your house, but those down south can keep theirs and pass it on to their children, which will then in turn give them the leg up that your children never had. I've got very complicated feelings about all of those things, but there's a basic fairness there, that those with the broadest shoulders should should shoulder the most of the burden. And at the end of the day, like Stuart was saying, if this is meant to help fix social care by providing it with more funding, it's not working, is it? We need people who are, why isn't it a percentage of the value of your total assets? That would be a lot more fair, wouldn't it? And it would net more money that could be reinvested in the system. Let's not forget, there's lots of people done very well out of this pandemic. All the people on this call and a lot of people who are watching have had a pretty shit time. But there are people there who have spent the last 2 years raking it in. There have been plenty of new millionaires created over the last 2 years. So let them pay some of the burden. Make sure we get people taxed fairly and properly in a way that everybody gets looked after when they need help.
There's lots of people doing very, very well out of the exponential growth of house values as well. Do you agree with Jane that the government promised that people wouldn't have to sell their homes?
Boris
And
Johnson
Lorena said so.
did. Yeah, Boris Johnson put it as a December 19 election pledge that no one would have to sell their homes. He did say that.
What a liar. Thank you, Jane. By the way, Tim Dredge tells us that we're both wrong on the amendment. So Tim Dredge will know.
I'm sure it's awful, whatever it
He's
is.
put a link in, just read the link, sort of. Finally, Paul, a surprising number of Tories were unhappy about this just for the last couple of minutes. Do you think that we're seeing even moderate Tories beginning to see through this very right-wing regressive government?
One that surprised me was Esther McVey. She's not known for being progressive in the slightest. Maybe this is something that she's seen and thought, actually, no, this is wrong. Maybe she's in fear for her seat, because this is going to upset a lot of older people, the traditional people who vote Conservative on average, are older, pensioners and so on, and this is going to be a sad thing for them. A lot of people who probably kind of think of themselves as having become a bit Tory, they bought the houses under Thatcher, and they feel like they are like little mini capitalists. And then they get there and they're like, actually, you're not a mini capitalist, because if you need any care, your home's gone, unless you've got a lot more money. So with regards to, there's a bit mentioned about north-south earlier, and this isn't necessarily north-south, this is poor, rich. This is like people with expensive homes versus people with, and on average, the houses in southern areas are more, but not not everywhere. And there's a lot of poverty in places like Cornwall, or there's pockets of poverty everywhere, and this is going to hit all those people equally. So it isn't a north-south divide thing, it is a rich-poor divide thing. What I was interested in, though, is the ones around here told the line again. So Diana Davison told the line. Yeah. Paul Howell decided that he would tax poor people. Every decision they've made has been, well, we'll raise national insurance, which is a regressive form of taxation that affects poorer people more. And these are the people who have been put in, and they are willing to lie, and they are willing to pretend things. They are not willing to put their necks on the line to disobey Boris Johnson.
Thank you, Paul. What an awfully depressing edition. It tells the 69th edition. The last topic that you wanted us to talk about was the suspension of Crispin Flintoff. I'm not going to allow the team to talk about that. I'm going to make a statement about it, and then we're going to finish. And also, I would like you, if you can, to restrain yourself from making any comments about what I've said, for reasons which I'll explain when I've finished. I'm just going to, you'll see why when. This is just a statement about the suspension of Crispin Flintoff. Crispin Flintoff has worked tirelessly and effectively to raise morale and to raise money for Labour Party groups, both before and especially during the pandemic. He's been a wonderful Labour Party member, but he's been suspended from the Labour Party. The story is this: his CLP chair resigned, including in the resignation letter this sentence, and I will read the words from that letter as reproduced by Crispin. Quote, "Anti-Semitism has been and continues to have been used for political ends, i.e. conflating anti-Semitism with anti-Zionism. As CLP secretary, on the instruction of his CLP executive, and without expressing any personal opinion on the matter, on the sentiment, Crispin circulated the letter to members, which was their right to see. Crispin was then suspended by the Labour Party's Governance and Legal Unit for conduct which is asserted could, quote, reasonably be seen to demonstrate hostility or prejudice based on race, religion, or belief." The words in the resignation letter were not Crispin's words, and there was no indication that they were his personal belief. It therefore appears that his allegedly hostile or prejudiced conduct consisted simply of relaying at second hand, for a reason however valid, a certain form of words. Do we think the offending sentence is anti-Semitic? We will never be able to discuss this matter because it appears that in the Labour Party, simply to state those words is taken as demonstrating anti-Semitic hostility. Would it be considered anti-Semitic to reproduce that person's words at third hand without expressing any personal opinion on the sentiment, exclusively in the context of a discussion about the validity of the Labour Party disciplinary procedures? I suspect that I am about to find out. That was not the only pertinent issue relevant to Crispin's suspension, however, because with his suspension came an instruction not to tell anybody about his suspension. Indeed, I am aware of a number of other letters from the Labour Governance and Legal Unit warning and disciplining members whilst threatening them that they will be suspended if they tell anyone. How have we managed to become a party which tries to discipline its members in secret like some petty repressive autocracy? Surely it is a human right in our democracy to be able to share such matters in public. I want to make it explicitly clear that I accept without reservation the IHRA working definition of anti-Semitism. I defend the right of the State of Israel to exist and, within behaviour expected or demanded of any other democratic nation, to defend itself when attacked. As a teacher, I taught pupils for 40 years about the inhuman persecution of the Jewish people and the Holocaust, about the inspiring and amazingly resilient ways the Jewish people responded, and always with the message that it must never happen again. As a Christian, my religious faith is based upon Judaic teaching. I am openly admiring of Judaism's family and community values and practices. I am the opposite of anti-Semitic. My comments above are not even about anti-Semitism, but solely about the present disciplinary practices of the Labour Party, which have become unjust and malign and need to change. You will realise that that is my I'm Spartacus moment, and I'm not going to allow anybody to chime up with the same. And you will realise why I've asked you not to comment, because although my words were very carefully chosen so as not to be in any way anti-Semitic, I don't want a situation where they can say, yes, yeah, there was nothing on the surface, but there was an undercurrent which encouraged people to. And that's why I've asked you not to comment at all. This is the 69th edition of Political Unmuted. I'm 69 years of age, and I think I'm proud of myself standing up against wrong. That is the end of tonight's show. The music will play. We'll all go away and have a cup of, get ourselves another cup of coffee or a glass of water. And when we return, Sam will be in charge. Thank you, team. Thank you, listeners. Bye-bye, everybody. Good night and God bless.
My name is Jack Atkinson, I'm not afraid. And I live and die by this vow that I've made. The only good fascist's a dead one, they say. And around here we are. When I first left all them months ago, I told him I'd come not to kill but to cure. Well, for an ambulance driver my shot's pretty sure. And around here we are. There'll be no pass around, no pass around, no pass around today. The fascists have come for our freedom, and we ain't gonna give it away. There'll be no pass around here today. I told my mother, now mother be strong, for the left way is right and the right way is wrong. And you can stick that on my grave when I'm gone, for I'm here we are. There'll be no pass around, no pass around, no pass around today. Fascists have come for our freedom, and we ain't gonna give it away. There'll be no pass around here today. The cast may be cast, and the cast may be cast, but you armies of darkness, you best do your worst. 'Cause to win, yeah, well, you gotta get past those first. And around here we are. There'll be no pass around, no pass around, no pass around today. The fascists have come for our freedom, and we ain't gonna give it away. There'll be no pass around here, no pass around, no pass around, no pass around today. No pass around, no pass around, no pass around today. No pass around, no pass around, no pass around today. The fascists have come for our freedom, and we ain't gonna give it away. There'll be no pass around here today. Keep the red flag flying here.
Oh, it's the second half. It won't be a long second half. Yeah, you'll have noticed if you do usually watch this program, if you do usually, I'm a bit slow today. That's because I had my COVID booster yesterday. Woohoo! So I'm very pleased about that. But yeah, I have a bit of brain fog going on, but I'm okay. I did feel a
Just
bit
think
icky.
of poor John. He's turned into a cartoon after his statement in the first half. There, he's just, oh, he's back. He's back. He's animated again.
Yeah. um. So yeah, there we go. There we go. I've took some paracetamol. I'm okay. I'm a little bit icky, but yeah, my brain isn't really here. Oh, also, it's been a long day. It's been a long week. It's been a long month. Yes, all of that stuff. There was a nice point made by Rachel when we're talking about the bus services that that was something that was actually raised by, and it's gone now. It's lost it. It was raised by was it the UN Special Rapporteur when he came to the UK? Was how basic transport is so essential to life that it is a basic basic thing that we need to get right. And lots of comments along the lines of this is not an accident, that the NHS being run down, transport being run down. It's all done purposefully because the money's being siphoned off, or in particular the NHS that is being prepared sort of for sale. And there were some good comments as well about how and this is the argument that I always bring up when people tell me to my face that the NHS is not being privatized, and it already is privatized, because when you've got waiting lists that are years and people are incentivized to go privately, a lot of us will see people on our social media feeds who actually go abroad now for surgery, that may be elective, but it may actually have some sort of long-term health impacts that would be of benefit if they were done at the right time in this country. So I think there's, and in my case for my children, it's occupational therapy, which is actually completely inaccessible, completely necessary, and the only way I can access it is through private providers that I can't afford. So unfortunately my children have to go without, but if I had the money, and those people who do, just buy it because they can. So that's privatized, isn't it? If you can't get it on the NHS and the only way you can get it is by paying, then that is very much the definition of privatized healthcare, and they're doing it all over the place. There's so many services now you can't get access to unless you pay. I still don't understand the thing about the council contribution to care homes, but one thing I was made aware of was that one of the impacts of the new social care reform is that the council has to offer the same rates to private patients as in-house patients or something like that. Anyway, top and bottom of it means that care under the council is going to end up costing more for everyone. So that's another problem, but I'm obviously not corpus mentis enough to cogitate that at the moment. Paul, have you seen any good comments you want to bring out?
Tim's talking about having a decent malt or a water or a coffee along with the show that we go well with that. I think was that one of the things John suggested. I've just finished a protein shake here, so that was my last little
protein
thing.
Shake.
Yeah. I've just
hit tea.
Yes. Hit 235 grams of protein for the day. That's how to live. That really is how to
water.
live. John's drinking water.
Easy water.
Yeah, and it's just generally there've been some really nice, good, positive comments, but it's been a bit of a sad show, hasn't it? I'm a bit tired of being sad now. I think I'm just gonna go for things because you can only. I'm really tired of what's happening with, like, let's say what's happened with Joe Solo this week. That was appalling as well. where the award we were talking about him winning last week. So he won the award last week, which was incredible, and then he had it stripped from him because he had suggested something very similar to what John mentioned before the show, about the politicisation of the issue of anti-Semitism in the Labour Party. Anyone and anyone who says anything like that apparently is in trouble, even from like an organisation that isn't within the Labour Party. And I just thought, like, if Joe Solo is going to be treated as if he's some kind of racist, and he's one of just one of the best human beings I've ever met, if that sort of thing would get me kicked out of a political party, then there's something wrong with the party. There's not something wrong with me. I'm not accepting that kind of thing. And I know John doesn't want us to say anything on this one, but really, what's the point? Really? Like, being on such a back foot all the time, worried about everything, when we know we'd be the ones who are out there fighting against all forms of racism, especially anti-Semitism. Like, we were the ones there who were making speeches when there were anti-Semites going into the Radisson Hotel in Durham, and I was stood there with a megaphone shouting at them, and there was Zeke howling at us and things like that. This is how we live our lives, like we would be the ones putting our bodies in the way when it came to any form of anti-Semitism. And there's this awful situation where people are attempting to cancel people, this really liberal form of anti-racism. And what they'll do is they'll try and cancel you if you say anything wrong. So, like, let's use the example of in a Labour Party meeting, if someone uses the wrong word and someone says, for example, as they have done, coloured rather than black, or rather than mixed heritage or anything like that, do you cancel that older person who thought that was a good thing to say, and do you say, right, that's you shall never be part of this party again, you're going to be kicked out, I'm going to suspend you? Or do you go, don't really use that word anymore? They go, I'm really sorry, and then they move on with their lives? Because any anti-racist worth the salt knows that you are trying to change minds, and you're trying to bring people with you, and you're trying to help people understand racism. Just attacking people and branding them as a racist is not any form of anti-racism at all. It is absolutely appalling. It is pathetic. It does not help. It assumes that once, even if, sometimes people haven't even done anything, but when they have done something, it assumes that that is them forever. Them at their worst is them forever. How are you going to go into a working class community, and people will have made mistakes with the language time and again? I know this for a fact. I know what children say, and you try to educate them to be better. If you, or just understand what they're saying, or just use better language. If you assume that that person cannot get any better, and that is them for the rest of their life, and they deserve to be punished forever for whatever it is, there is no point. There is literally no point in anti-racism if that's all it's for. It needs to be to help people to understand and develop and bring us together, and bring the world closer together, not to split us into weird factions. And that's... So I'm not going to tolerate this kind of nonsense anymore.
Have you noticed Neil Terry has obviously been reading that book, Eat, Shoots and Leaves. He's changed the position of the comma on hope, not hate. And he's changed the comma so it says hope not, hate. Neil, you're on fire tonight. That is just so clever. I love its cleverness and punctuation rules. Okay.
And I think one thing to sort of keep your eyes on it is, while you're looking at people and pointing fingers, the news broke today that one of our actual councillors in Durham has gone through his complaints procedure for putting some really Islamophobic stuff on Facebook. This is a gentleman who was a former member of the BNP. He's known locally as BN Pete. And, you know, I'm not going to repeat what he put on Facebook, but it was clearly Islamophobic. There was no ifs or buts and no ambiguity about it before. And he more or less said in his hearing at Durham County Council, sort of, I've got my opinions, I'm not racist, but and these people are allowed to be prominent figures in our public lives. And I think, not that I'm saying, you know, that's not important because this, but I do think that you've got to realize that, you know, we've got one of the most far right governments any of us have ever seen. I wasn't around at the Thatcher years, but lots of people who I know who were say the government is more far right than Margaret Thatcher was. And in the Northeast, we are just opening our own Yarlswood detention centre for women, which is absolutely pointless and meaningless, except as a symbol of white supremacy. That is it. That is all it's for. All it's for is for the government to be able to say, look, we're punishing these immigrants. Doesn't that make you like us better? Because detention doesn't help, doesn't fix people overstaying on their visas, doesn't fix sex trafficking, doesn't fix people being trafficked into this country to tend cannabis farms, and it doesn't deal with the causes of the global economic and the global environmental crisis that forces people to make the very difficult decision to try and cross the channel on a dinghy. Nobody does that because they want to work in McDonald's. It's not a fact, but that's what people are being led to believe, because we've got these far right narratives running through our news media, which is terrifying to me.
The worrying thing for me as well, you talked about BN Pete earlier on. There are people like him. There are people who have genuinely anti-Semitic views, who actually have said these things, like some really blatant things, calling me an anti-Semite on Twitter and things because I'm a Labour Party member, but them having genuine anti-Semitism there and also having a little Israeli flag in their username. You know, there is something incredibly worrying going on there when they are talking about, like, you know, you scroll back through and they've actually said horrible things about Jewish people, horrible, like hateful things, like these people are dangerous, and yet they feel comfortable enough to call someone an anti-Semite because they're in the Labour Party. Something has gone horrifically wrong in order for that to happen. And I think we need to really have a think about how we want to proceed.
So to take a quick, sharp turn away from that subject and to the one that most people have been talking about this week, Boris Johnson's speech, was it intentionally fluffed? Was that designed to be bad, or is he just really that incompetent? Jane, do you have an opinion? You're muted.
I think it was a diversion tactic. I think I've never heard him apologise for anything. I've never heard him apologise for calling Nazanin Zaghari-Ratcliffe a journalist, even though she's rotting in a jail cell because of it. But I heard him say sorry so many times then. I think he was trying to make himself look like he was making a mistake, and he's vulnerable and lovable Boris, and he's only human, and cause a big diversion away from the NHS legislation vote.
What about you, Stuart?
See, I think the opposite. I think he is genuinely incompetent, and he's now at the very level of where his skill of bumbling through things has come to an end, because the argument he was trying to make, I think, was that Britain sells culture. But he was trying to make it to a room full of people where he needed to make the argument that Britain will become the manufacturer of its own destiny. You know, he leaned into the idea of a 1960s Britain where we were selling Britishness across the globe. But we can't do that anymore because of certain economic choices that we've made in the last 5 years, say. And, you know, we've now got to invert that idea, and, you know, we've got to look at building our, you know, green economy ourselves. We've got to start growing things more at home. That was the argument he should have been making. The fact that he relied on Peppa Pig, the way the governments of the 60s and 70s would have relied on the Beatles. That just shows how off the ball he is. He's really mixed up. He's messed up. He doesn't know where he's going.
I think probably they should look at the damage he's done to the Peppa Pig brand and see if there's see if they can sue him for it. John, do you have any opinions on this?
I was very interested in Stuart's ideas there. Absolutely. I mean, there is some question in the news, isn't there, about whether he's poorly. He's certainly very tired. I mean, it's sort of, I agree with Stuart. We're way past questioning whether he's up to the job, surely. I mean, we knew this, that he wasn't up to the job years ago. It's just a matter of how long he can go on. And I suspect that's, I asked the question to Paul, you know, is he on the way out? I think exactly the opposite. I think he's all they've got at the moment. And people like Paul Howell and Dehenna Davison, they are just 100% behind him because they know damn well that as soon as that kind of Boris Johnson mask comes off the Tory party and it's seen for what it really is, that they're just going to get absolutely slaughtered. I think that we've got a lot more Boris Johnson's bumbling to cope with.
Tim in the comments is indicating that it's possibly the consequence of some kind of alcohol issue, alcohol withdrawal. That's certainly a rumor that exists. Neil says, do you not like Deanna Davison? No. Well, no, I will answer that properly. She's a lovely person, but she's got a terrible voting record. And she obviously, me and her disagree very much on what would make the world a better place. Unfortunately, she's got power.
I got into terrible trouble, Sam, for saying that she was a smart cookie. And it used of dreadful things. And in fact, I meant it as a compliment. I think Dehenna Davison is a very clever and percipient lady. And sort of, I think you underestimate her at your peril. I don't think the same. I don't think the same as some of the other Tories in the region, sort of, who are definitely second raters. But watch out for that lady, because she is nobody's fool. She's very clever and she's smart with the media as well. I hold her in quite high regard. That doesn't mean I agree with the damn word that comes out of her mouth, but sort of like Neil has nothing to do with it at all. I reckon her.
Yeah.
Somebody
Tim says he. Whoop.
Go on. Somebody asked me if Tory backbenchers will be revolting. To which point I had to reply that they're all revolting.
Yes. Tim says he met Boris at Henley at Thames Boat Show, and he was not impressed with his attitude towards him then. So I guess that's one of the real tricks, is see how people treat you when they think no one's watching.
You believe Tim Dredge? Do you believe Tim Dredge? I find it very hard. Tim Dredge has been everywhere, done everything. It was like Henry Nicholson. Every the wonderful councillor Henry Nicholson, the Shildon councillor, who's now unfortunately deceased, but a wonderful man. But every village you went to on with him around in the planning sort of visits, he'd had a girlfriend in that village. Oh, I had a girlfriend here. And he knew the cricket club and the football club.
Yes.
But Tim Dredge is absolutely international. He's been everywhere and done everything, and he knows everything. He's either the most amazing man, and we just need to give him his show, Paul, or he's making it up. Which is it, Tim? Which is it?
He's a secret agent. He's a 00 agent, and he's in deep cover.
I can vouch for a lot of what he said over the past few years. Like there was a thing he mentioned earlier on about the UKIP thing, and that's definitely true. So I would go with all the things he said are true.
Paul, I haven't asked you about what you think about Boris and his bumblings.
This has been the panel have disagreed on anything. I'm gonna go down the line of it doesn't matter, because they're all like they're. I suppose in the day, like say you could say which is the least smelly shit. You know what I mean? Like John Major maybe wasn't such a terrible human as Boris Johnson is. But whoever's going to replace Boris Johnson, who is probably going to be Rishi Sunak, and he played a role in triggering the world financial crisis in 2008, and he's the Chancellor. It doesn't get better. Johnson going away doesn't get better. It just means like, okay, what are our electoral chances? So whether or not he's bungling, whether or not, like the fact that we're even guessing about whether he's truly incompetent or not well, or he's bluffing, mask slipped, the guy's played the country like a fiddle, even though he's not a particularly talented man. He's just someone who, it's the most interesting thing I've ever heard about Boris Johnson, and it really resonates. I was listening to a podcast that was called the Iron Men or something like that a while back, and I'll have a look for it and I'll put it in the chat before the end of the show. But it said that someone who he used to work for said that Boris Johnson doesn't believe in the concept of the truth. He doesn't believe the truth exists, so therefore he can't lie. So therefore, whatever he says with absolute conviction, because he knows for him, there's no such thing as the truth. So therefore, you can say anything, and it is no less true than anything else. And that's what they were saying. He's such a dangerous man. So yeah, all those things could be true at the same time. As far as Boris Johnson's concerned, he could be poorly, and he could be bluffing, and he could be just made a mistake. It really doesn't matter, because the truth is an alien concept to him and the people who follow him.
Barbara Clare has just commented that Boris is great on the Now show, and I have to agree with that. Sort of. Of course, it isn't Boris on Jane. Boris doesn't go on the Now show. It's somebody who takes him off, and very amusing.
Isn't the Boris Johnson impersonator standing in a by-election somewhere? Isn't he in one of these by-elections that's going on?
Dear me, I don't know.
I don't know, and I should know, shouldn't I?
Google
I should
it
have
now.
the full list or blue tacked on my cupboard wall here, so that I know what's happening at all times. I think what's interesting to me is that I'm getting told a lot by different people that what people value in politicians is credibility, and the idea that they're competency. So I don't understand why competency is really important to voters, yet we've got this mess at the top. Like, what's going on? Anyway, there we go, mic drop. What's going on?
But I would say beware on that, Matt, Sam, because they lie. They tell you that what we want to know, why don't politicians just answer the question? Do not answer the question is my advice to you as you go to try and be an MP. It's an utter disaster. As soon as you start telling people what you think, you've no idea the bile that comes your way. My advice would be to for a long time and say nothing.
Say nothing. Yeah. I've started listening to a podcast, which is a BBC Radio 4 program called It's a Fair Cop. It's a stand-up comedy thing by an ex-police. Do you know this one, John?
Recommended. It's sort of go on BBC Sounds and listen to the whole series. It is fantastic.
I was giggling my way around B&M, I've got to say. Some of it is quite, close to the knuckle. But the first episode has lots of jokes about corrupt politicians, which I couldn't help having a little bit of a giggle at. So I've put that in the chat if people want to follow that link just for the first episode. It's 30 minutes long. And he said, when I was a police officer, people used to tell me, I couldn't do your job. And I said, yeah, that's because you're in handcuffs, counsellor. And obviously I can't deliver that as well as he did, but it did make me laugh. I don't intend to be in handcuffs anytime soon, but because they'll have to catch me first. Right. I am going to call this episode to an end. Thank you very much for joining us and coping with my brain fog. If you the Stuart's Wi-Fi will be so much better next week because I've had this injection, so everyone's gonna have better broadband because I'm gonna act as a transmitter for you all. Remember that we are here every Tuesday at 9 o'clock. We've been here every Tuesday at 9 o'clock for more than 69 weeks so far. We have had a couple of breaks in there, haven't we? But those were, times when you're allowed a break. We are on Twitch, Twitter, YouTube, and Facebook, and on whatever app you use to listen to your podcasts. Just search for us, Socialist Think Tank, and you will find us. And you can also join as a member for absolutely free. You can choose to donate if you want to, but we are very, very, very socialist, so you don't get any extra benefits for donating except that warm fuzzy feeling in the bottom of your stomach when we do something nice that you agree with and you support us to do it. Thank you. Okay, is there any other messages you want to pass on, Paul?
You've done it beautifully, even with your brain fog. Well done.
Thank you. Okay then, and we're gonna say bye-bye, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Keep the red flag flying here.